about long-term value of automation, and especially after the release. And we are three from Gojob. So my name is Thibaut. I'm head of product and Nocode at Gojob. So taking care of the product part, meaning managing all the product managers, and the Nocode part that we'll talk about today. And we got Anto.
Yes. Hello everybody, I'm Anthony. I'm a product manager at Gojob. I'm doing this for almost 2 years now, and I'm an automation specialist. I think that's all for now.
And so today we'll be talking about what we do good at Gojob in Nocode for the long-term value, but also what we could be doing better. And for that we got a dev at Gojob because we got a lot of inspired by dev methods, and we got a special guest, Luc, for that.
So Luc, I'm staff engineer, and yes, I love looking at what they are doing and what I can take from traditional coding and put it in Nocode.
Yes, so for some parts we'll show you good stuff and some other parts bad stuff that we are doing. The two of them are interesting, I think. Okay, so let's start. It's an interactive session. We are a few 9 in the morning, so feel free to ask any question. As an introduction to set up the landscape, so we are Gojob. To explain to you a bit why we do Nocode, it's important for you to understand what is Gojob. So we are a staff agency, so a workforce platform, meaning we connect the people who are looking for jobs with the people who are with the company who are looking for people. And so to do that, we use the power of digital. So dev, traditional devs, data analysts, data scientists, and Nocode to automate all the recruitment process, but also we staff the guys, meaning we take care of the contract part, of the payroll part. So there are a lot of processes to automate, and that's why we started in the Nocode part. As an introduction also, why we chose more than 2 years ago to use Nocode, it was mainly for the time to market and the scalability part, meaning with Nocode, we consider at Gojob that we can do things at scale and put it on the market very quickly. And that's why our first use case as Nocode, not in number of scenario, but in the history part of Gojob, is Nocode as a non-scalable things. Nocode in order to be replaced by traditional devs projects. And so that's why one of the use cases is actually just to build proof of concepts in order to learn. It reverses the traditional way of working, because as a product manager, when you work with devs, actually you have to learn a lot to do a huge discovery before building. And with Nocode, it's quite the opposite. You build first, and then you learn on the market, because you can put in 1 week a product in the hands of your clients. So I talked yesterday about Gojob USA. We started our activity in the USA, and within 3 months we replaced it by traditional devs, because we had learned that okay, there is a market fit, and okay, that's how it works in the US. The two others are scalable Nocode, so Nocode that don't aim to be replaced by traditional devs. The first one is we build a lot of Nocode products, so with interfaces, user features that are aimed to be reliable on the long term. And we use Nocode instead of devs quite often when there are not a lot of interconnections with our main products. For instance, our core value, our core activity is to do the recruitment part. So we won't do Nocode for the core recruitment, but what we did is we added a feature in terms of recruitment that wasn't able with traditional devs. We automate one part of the recruitment, fully automated, to enable our clients to recruit whatever hour they want. Why? Because we fully automate the recruitment process with SMS flows. So we contact the candidate with SMS, they answer yes or no. Depending on the answer, we ask them, okay, do you get the proper shoes and all that stuff that you need to work. Are you available at 5? If they say yes, okay, they got their contract, they can start at 5 in the morning. And the last one, we'll be talking a lot of that today, it's about automation. So full automation, we don't even get some user interfaces, we don't focus on UX, it's just we got one process, it takes 5 hours per day to work one person, we kill the process, not the person, and we fully automate it. Any question, feedbacks?
Yeah, maybe. What did you get from step 1 to step 2?
That's a good question. It was quite a big of everything at the beginning, and then we structured the why we do it. So it was just unstructured. Quickly about our stack. So we are a scale-up, meaning we got already our own data, our own processes. So one of the main features that we look for in Nocode is to be able to connect with our data. So our databases, our data warehouse. That's why when speaking about our stacks, it always begins with Gojob. Then we got the glue between everything for us is Make. It's the automation part to collect data, put data into things. And for some of the data, we access it with the Google Suite because we use Google within Gojob, or with the Postgre way of doing it. And for some use cases, we'll have to replicate the data to build our own no-code database. And for that, we use a lot Airtable and Google Sheet. Then one of the main strengths of the no-code is to be connected with all external plugins. So that's some example of the one which we are using. Twilio a lot for conversational messages. It's quite good. And for some of our use cases, we build interfaces. So for that, our major use cases are internal. So when we build internal use cases, we want to deliver quickly, and so we won't do Bubble for that for now. We mostly do Airtable plugins, for instance, mini extension, or in other use cases, Notion or Slack as well can be a user interface. And we have used a bit Bubble for external innovations. Let's enter in the main topics of today. So yesterday night was a great party. After coming back, we built an automation, which is this one. And our goal of today will be to go from this one to the Gojob way of doing automations and to go through it step by step. And so we will be talking a bit about Make in the coming slides. And so, yes, we'll get to this one. And so, let's start.
So, hello again, everybody. When you see, I'm giving you a little bit of context first. As a staffing agency, we have recruiters in Gojob who are in the phone most of the time to qualify the candidates, and they lose a lot of time to have the good person on the phone and to staff the candidate. So we had an idea for helping them. We do want to automatize the pre-qualification of the application process. So we decide to send an SMS to each candidate before to calling them to know if they are okay with the information of the mission and if they are available. So now you know that. What do you think do this automation? No? Nobody want to answer? So this automation is not a way to send SMS, it's a way to receive SMS. So we have a webhook here, who receives the response of the candidate from our service Twilio, and we have different roads regarding depends the answer of the candidate. So this one is when the candidate say yes. This one is when the candidate say no, and this one is when the candidate no reply. And we have another one who say the recruiter, oh, this guy say yes, you can, it's a Slack notification, you can call him.
And we use Airtable as the Kanban, the to-do list on that. That's why you see Airtable modules.
Yeah. So why I am showing you that? I'm showing you that because one of the main rule of Gojob is to get others understand your automation. Because when you work as a team, you need to be understood by everyone. So what make all of us to rename our scenario? So it's basically what we do. We rename the modules, we rename the filters, we rename everything.
That's a simple advice, but it's often like not done because the strength of Nocode is to be quick, and so you often don't do that. But when you get bugs and when Anthony is on holidays, I need to be able to go into it.
So it's basically what we do first, but the other thing we do for documentation. When you got an automation, we talk about data. We need to know where comes from the data and where is going the data. So make allow us to have some notes here, and we add all the. I'm going here as well. We can see everything. We can have all the documentation. For example, for Twilio, we add our Twilio flow. For Airtable, we have the URL of our Airtable database. As well, we know where goes the data. And we also create documentation every time we create a project. The documentation is a technical and functional documentation. And I'm going to show you an example of documentation for a random project. We use property to have the owner of the project, the priority of the project, the target date, and all the discovery of the project. In this documentation, we have our interview, we have our SQL request if we need this. We also have tasks associated to our documentation, to our project, to iterate on the project and to know where we are going.
And if you can go just on the Nocode intro in the Nocode main page to see the Kanban, because we use, that is our documentation, but that's also the way we manage all of our projects. This is the same page for our Nocode project and our product project, so that the product managers can choose between a Nocode feature and a code feature. Yes. So this is all the documentation of our Nocode.
Yes, and we have the product flow for all our projects, and also we can have the task associated to projects to know what we do every day. Okay.
Any question?
Do you use it for your compliance with GDPR?
Do you understand? Okay. In Nocode, to be quite honest, we choose projects where GDPR compliance, security is not the main concern, because the goal of Nocode is to be quick, and we are scale up even in our traditional devs. I know it's recorded, but it's important. We have to focus on that, but we have also, and especially for Nocode, to find the right trade-off. So for now, but it will change, our Nocode teams are not trained for that.
Do you manage a lot of personal data?
Yes.
Sensitive ones, and it can be useful this documentation to document your GDPR process. It
Yeah.
can be very useful. This documentation.
Okay, so that's a good advice because, but I'm not trained on that. But if you say it can help, it will be an objective.
I'm not a specialist.
Because it's a bit as we say in the conference yesterday. So we are quite mature on the reliability, scalability, but now we need to improve on the modularity, on the compliance, and on the security. So this is one of the things we'll focus on.
So I go back to my scenario. All the documentation is okay right now. And what do you think is wrong with this scenario now? No one's,
There are three Airtable blocks quite identical.
yes.
Have you worked at Gojob?
So yes, we have three modules that are doing the same thing. They are updating the data from to in Airtable. The difference between these three modules is manage data in over module, and it's cheaper.
Yeah, maybe. So you think it's simple. It's maybe more simple, but in fact you added some code like switch cases. So is it really that more simple from before? So it's more industrialized, but maybe for a beginner it will be harder to code this.
I don't. I think it's just good practice because when I do the switch formula in my module, I use my documentation to explain what I do. The documentation help me to be more explicit of what can do each module of my scenario.
And the second point is it's just after you have 4 or 5 other steps, you have to duplicate it in the previous method. In this method, it's really simple because you just have like one flow.
Yes, the issue that we want to solve here is not simplicity, even if simplicity gives us insight on the right no coding, but it's more about evolutivity, maintainability. But yes, it's not quite simple. It's just different, but more simple to maintain.
And why don't you use the automation from Airtable to do that? Because it can be inside the Airtable and you don't have to use make for that. So why don't you use make?
We do this because we want it's a decision. We want all our automated automation in Make because we want to centralize all this intelligence with the same tool. So we use Airtable automation when we need to manipulate data inside Airtable, and when we have over use case, we systematically use Make. And at the beginning, we use Airtable webhook to do this.
In your case, if you had an action to do if there is no reply, how will you deal with that? Because in that case, the only action that you have is to send a Slack message. The answer is yes. But if you had something to do if the answer is no, how do you deal with that? Then you keep the two Airtable modules on your simplification.
So I'm not sure I understand the question, but the candidate have a time to answer. So if he do not answer for 24 hours, Twilio send me the answer, the JSON no reply, and I can manage my use case here.
And for instance, if after, maybe if you go back on the video here, if after the action that you want for no or no reply is a Slack, for instance, you can use the same functions here. If it's not sending a Slack message, but any other things, you can either put it after or put a router, or even later on we'll show you, you can create a function to call another scenario in this case.
Yes. How do you manage roles inside the job, and especially in that case when you have, I mean, people knowing things better than others? Do you, for instance, make no-code reviews or things like that?
So we do no-code reviews. As a product builder, we are transversal, so we work in every department of Gojob, and when other people want to do no-code, we are here to review them, and we give them different environments to work, and they have to. We do a meeting before starting work to know what they want to do and helping them design the scenario. And after that, we do a QA of the scenario and they learn like this, and we document. They document their work. And I think that's all.
And one advice for the review: it's not the product builder who owns the scenario who explain. It has to be on the computer of the person trying to understand it.
Yeah, we start with the documentation, and the reviewer has to see the documentation, read the documentation, try to understand everything, and go on the scenario. And it's our process is looking in the scenario, test the scenario, and it's a way to QA a scenario.
So one question on that, please. I suppose you've got some critical scenarios which are more sensible than others. How do you measure over the time when you make them evolve? Do you have some kind of delta? Can you review just a small change on the scenario, or do you have to review the whole thing?
We do that in good intelligence. So if there is just debugging something, we can just do the amelioration, but we document it. But we do QA for big project or big automation.
But yes, we are not yet there, and it will be a cool feature for Mate.
Yeah,
So
I think it's this kind of feature is not yet in the
Yes.
tool.
But when it's really critical, you can just duplicate the scenario, disable the previous one, and make a modification in the new one. It's not as good as versioning or stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
which is the
it's
kind of
still
thing you would have in
solution.
this traditional
Yeah.
development world where you'd be reviewing a pull request and just checking the small changes you make.
Okay, we got 10 points, I think, and 20 minutes left.
Perfect. So for managing errors, we have two kinds of error: expected error that we manage in our scenario, and unexpected error. For managing unexpected error, we receive mail from Make when we have an unexpected error, and our way to manage it is we have a Kanban, error Kanban. We have an automation. And this automation is on Make, and this automation parse the mail from Make, and we can create the cards with the name of the scenario, the URL of the execution of the scenario. In the name of the scenario, we add the initials of the owner of the scenario. As well, we can assign the card to the product builder, and as well, we have data about what scenario is good, what scenario is bad, and and we can know how to fix it, and we improve our way to do automation like this. We also have Slack notification. So when we have an unexpected error, to be we receive Slack notification, and as well we can easily and quickly fix all our issues.
This is question. The trigger for this is you forward the email to some address and that picks up.
It's a mail hook in with Make. We have mail hook, so
it's a mail hook. Okay, you forward.
Yes, we did that before the Make API and before Make at the assignment part. That's why we did it.
Okay.
Like it. But to explain to you, so we got 1.5 million operations. Our goal as a team is to get 20 hours per week, less than 20 hours. That's where we are.
are you also using error on the in-make workflow?
Yes, that's the unexpected ones, and that's a good transition for you. Oh no, yes. Before.
Well, I continue.
As you want.
I continue. So, and we also have a functional error. It's not technical. It's when you do not want, as a product builder, to be notified. It's when you have something unusual in your scenario, and we manage it directly in the scenario. For example, here, it's for example of SMS. Imagine the people do not answer yes or no, or just no reply. It just answers something else. It's not a technical error, it's a functional error, and we just want to notify the recruiter. You have an unusual use case, you have to contact the candidate.
And usually you notify the business when it's about data consistency. It's the main reason why we notify the users. The input is wrong, some data has been deleted, and so that's when we notify them. And this will answer your question. So that's me. Okay. So here the issue is we want to reduce the number of errors that we have in our scenario. We want to anticipate the errors, and if we can, to manage them within the scenario and not be notified. Okay, there is an error. So to us, the error management within a scenario, it's all about data. So when we check, okay, will I have an error? We follow all the data paths. The worst that can happen in a scenario is when you got 0 notification of errors, and yet your scenario doesn't do what he's aimed for. So for instance, so we don't do, you can pause. When you got a root, the usual error is the usual errors is not to be exhaustive between the two integrated roots. We have to be messy so that either the data goes up or the data goes down, but you cannot lose any data. So that's the first example. A second example is we ask ourselves, okay, which modules are at risk, and usually it's all the scenario that requires a specific data in the right format. For instance, get an Airtable field or get an Airtable line. If the line is not here, okay, you will be an error. Slack, you need to send the message to the proper user. What happens if my Slack ID is not good? So that's the typical ones. And so for this one, so we anticipate the errors, so this cannot be managed within the scenario, but that's where we put the Notion module that will automatically increase the database, so that will be data driven in our improvement of our scenarios. Yeah, and yes, the questions that we ask also is so it's all about data. What happens if I get no data? For instance, every time we got a search module, we have to handle the case there is no data coming from that module, because otherwise you will get errors. It's all about data. What happens if I click twice on my run scenario? I have to be sure that my scenario triggers an action, so that if I play twice, it won't happen again or do something I haven't planned. So if you have to remind yourself just one thing about this is we check all our modules, asking ourselves about the data consistency, data reliability, and modules reliability. And so that's why in our example, so we put here on Slack, the Slack is at risk. We put a filter here also to be sure that we properly receive the data from the Gojobbers. So the answers, the Gojobber is our worker. Here we put also, we want to be sure after being here that all the data which is needed is actually here. So that's what we do an answer check. And I think that's all. And when we update the record, what could have happened is that you got a business user on Airtable who has deleted the line, and so this module will be in error. That's what we do.
Do you have questions?
Do you have a kind of documentation for what could go wrong on each kind of module also, or not?
Yes.
Yes. But we need to speak about it just later.
Okay, it's the
The next one.
okay. We'll in number 7. It will be. It's me. Okay. So one key thing is that we realized, like 1 year after launching, that we were blind after we put our automation in production. So each product builder put in production like 10 scenarios a week, maybe more, maybe less. But after that, we didn't know, was the automation used, was the automation not used, was the automation in error, and so we were completely blind because we didn't have the right tool for the product builder to know within like 2 minutes, okay, that's all my scenario, that's how they do perform, not from a technical point of view, this was before, and the data we analyzed, but from a functional and business point of view. So the idea that we got, so that's the V1, just to test, we are thinking of a V2. So the V1 was, we add this module, which is not just a Google Sheets module, that adds a line on any Google Sheet. Maybe you can switch on no, on the make scenario here, and yes, on the final version here, if you can click on it. So we choose the name of the KPIs that we want to check. It has to be a business KPIs, a product KPIs. For instance, here I want to know, okay, the number of application answer. It's not exactly that. It's the number of yes. So the number of candidates we validated with that process, and then we got 3 parts: KPI name, the week number, because we follow our KPIs every week, and the number. Here it's 1, but in certain automation it can be the length of an array, it can be anything, but to monitor how many, the value of the KPIs we want to track. So this goes into the Nocode use KPI tracking in the raw data part. So it's really simple, it's name of KPI, week number. And then when you go on the use dashboard, you got here all all your automations. And it calculates, maybe you can click here, I don't know. Okay, and then it's just a sum if of all the data you got here. And so what we do want is that the product builder at the beginning of each week, he looks at just all the data of his Nocode. And we want to be data driven in the way we handle it. And for instance, that is make downtime this week. And so maybe you can click on it. And so we use really that at the beginning of each week to analyze our performance, but from a business point of view.
Go.
Yes.
When and how do you identify the KPI you want to track?
We do that in good intelligence.
During the concept,
during the conception,
design?
yeah,
Okay.
during the design, and we also ask to the business what they want to track, what are their KPI. So we have different use cases. We also want to have some KPIs for us to know, for example, if our tools are used correctly and if I just used basically by everyone. And it's a good way to track this.
So that's the V1. It was a proof of concept. It works. So our goal now is to switch from that to a tool that is made for KPIs monitoring, such as Google Data Studio, such as Grafana. We haven't decided yet, but our goal is to change because it works for us.
And finally, we share all our best practice in Notion. We have an onboarding when we have a new product builder, And this onboarding, it's a resume of all that cards. And for example, we share how to do a good documentation, how to manage errors, for example, all kinds of errors, technical errors, functional errors, unexpected errors. We have Gojob standards, so I think I can
Yes, and go to the all the questions about data errors. Can you find it?
this one. So we have documentation for everything. And we also do documentation when we learn something. So 2 years of Nocode in Gojob, we learn a lot of things because we are lucky. We work with a tech team, so they can learn us, for example, how to do SQL. They can help us to understand how tech works or how to use new technology. So, for example, we have documentation for manage API and use JSONs. We have documentation to learn SQL. We have documentation on Make and how to use the services we use every day, for example, Studio Studio for SMS or Slack. And in this onboarding, we try to design a way to learn Nocode with our standards. We also share auto-evaluation tool.
Maybe you can open it to the question yesterday.
Yes, it's a good question. We also share auto-evaluation tool as well. When you arrive in the job, you can notch yourself, and you can also know where you want to go, what you want to learn. If you want to be more data-driven or product-driven, you can. It's a good way to understand what you need to know and where you want to go.
That's public, you can find it.
How do you enforce those standards? Is there a way of templating standard types of workflows or sharing standard steps inside the workflows? Is that something you do?
Luc will be talking a bit about that in one part. So we got our standards in terms of development standards, so good practices, but in terms of like kind of generic modules, we'll be talking about that. And that's a good transition to what we could still be learning from our tech teams. This was the good stuff, now it's our work.
Yeah, so just a few best practices for traditional coding. The first thing, when I was looking at their scenario at first, they were huge and complex. And that's something that we want to avoid because it's really hard to maintain. And in coding, we have one principle, it's a single responsibility principle. A function should do only one thing. So when you look at this scenario, for example, it's a contract checker. The first part is taking information about how the contract should be. The second part, the information of a contract, and then is making several checks. There is, in this scenario, a lot of data transformation, stuff like that. So one thing is to say, okay, we can split it in 3 parts and make a function. So instead of having a big scenario, we have a smaller scenario, and we make HTTP code. We transform our big scenario on smaller API. I think we were talking about that yesterday, and we're actually doing the same at Gojob. And this way is easier to read because you don't have to think about the data transformation. You say, okay, we took information about how the contract should be, we get information from the contract, and we do several checks. And when we want to go, like to have more detail, we go on other scenarios, and we have the data of the data transformation and everything. It's easier to maintain because when you have a problem, you end up the problem on a smaller scenario, and you can reuse the scenario. I mean, for example, if you want to take information of a contract, we maybe have another use case who do the same, so we just use the same scenario, and it's really useful. So what we try to do is to Gojob is to do small scenarios, and with a conventional name, trying to get everything ordered, which is not easy with Wiki actually.
And I think we don't do that quite often because we still neglect the conception phase. I mean, when you conceive your automation, we don't spend enough time to say, okay, what are my micro or nano services, and that's something that we focus on. Spend more time, like not rushing on the automation, but be more insightful at the beginning.
Another thing, it's not for small scenario, but for bigger scenario, bigger project. Sometimes we don't want to rely on a specific, for example, database. In Nocode, sometimes they like to increase the pricing, have some limitation. So one thing that we do in traditional coding is making an abstraction. Or in this case, don't want to know if it's an Airtable, a Notion, or something else. So one good practice, it can be to hide the database behind a webhook. And this way, if you want to change, because finally Notion has some limitation, I want to go to Airtable, you just have to change one scenario. And it can be really useful when you're working on a big project, and especially if you increase your pricing and your project is getting bigger and bigger, it's better to hide the infrastructure in a smaller scenario.
Yes. Splitting the functions like this, isn't it more expensive in terms of consumption?
Yeah, it's a bit more expensive because you have 2 more blocks first. That's the cost.
Yes, 2 more per yes. A bit, but we got 1.5 million, so it's okay.
Yeah, okay.
What's not okay in terms of number of operations, it's not adding 2 more blocks. It's just, for instance, having a module which is add a row on a G sheet and then do it like 1,000 times.
Yeah, okay.
That's an example where we can increase our, but this no.
And something that you have to think about when you're doing that is to use, in Make you can use IP restriction, and maybe it's better as well to make an authentication block to be sure that it's not someone who get the webhook and just call the scenario. So you have to think about a little about security as well.
And in terms of number of operations, that's a good question actually. So here is the case where if you multiply by 10 the number of the volume of your business case, for instance, by 10 the number of workers, sometimes it will multiply by 10 the number of operations if you add 1 line. That's not a good case. Here, the volume increase depends not on the volume of workers, but on the volume of executions. So which is okay in terms of scalability.
I have a question, a bit technical. It's for can you go back to the 8th slide? Yeah. So when you use a webhook like that, do you know a way to make the calls synchronous? Because like the way you do it, if you have like an iterator on the first part, it's gonna send all the requests on the same moment. And in the top, no, there, it's gonna receive all the data in the same moment, and it's gonna make a lot of calls on the same moment.
If you have a webhook response. If you don't put a webhook response, it's directly say, okay, I take it. But if you have a webhook response, it waits the whole scenario before to
Okay,
give
thank
you
you.
back the.
Okay, thank you. So that means, okay.
But actually, it can be good to don't have response when you want to parallelize.
Yeah. Okay.
And at the end, it's something that we don't do yet at Gojob, but I think we go in this direction, is to add more configuration. And maybe have a concept of environment that we don't have in Make. So this is a simple example. I use a JSON. It could be a data store call directly inside Make. And for example, like you have one URL, you know that you will call it, I don't know, 10 times in your scenario. It's better to just have that in one configuration. We can as well have some what we call feature flipping. For example, when you want to test a scenario, but at the end you know that it costs you a lot of money because it's real and it costs €1, we can just put in the configuration a boolean, and in the filter say, okay, if it's yes, I send the SMS, if it's no, I don't send it. And while testing, it's easier to just go on the configuration and say, okay for this one, not okay for this one.
Thanks.
Any question? on all of those points. So I guess we're done. Thanks.
Thank you.